There is a moment in life when you stop fleeing the pain and begins to dance with it. For most people, this moment reaches 30 years, not because the pain gets smoother, it still hurts, but because you finally develop wisdom to realize that it didn't come to destroy you, came to rebuild you. Viktor Frankl discovered this as worse as possible, lost everything in the Nazi extermination camps, family, freedom, future. But it was precisely deep in the well of human experience that he found a revolutionary truth. When you can't change your situation, you can still change the way you interpret it. And this change of interpretation can turn hell into growth. At 30, you already carry enough scars to understand this alchemy. You have already lost people, dreams, certainties. He has already found that the world is not fair and that perfect plans collapse. But it also discovered something more important, that you can survive what you thought you would kill you. It is in this crossroads between experience and maturity that suffering is no longer only suffering. He becomes wisdom. Not automatically, that would be naive, but through a deliberate choice to extract meaning from what it once seemed to be destructive. Frankl called it inner freedom. The last human freedom, the one that no one can take from you, even when they take everything else. It is the freedom to choose your attitude towards what you cannot control. At 30, you are ready to exercise this freedom consciously. Because finally you understand that resisting pain only amplifies it, but consciously embraces it transforms it. The laboratory of the first blows before 30, suffering comes as an unwanted surprise. A betrayal that shatters our confidence in love, a resignation that shakes our notion of competence, the death of someone dear who teaches us about impermanence. Each blow seems to come out of nowhere and lets us ask, why with me? This is the data collection phase. We are accumulating evidence that life is not the fairy tale that promised us. What effort does not always guarantee result. May good people suffer and bad people sometimes thrive. That the universe does not seem to follow our rules of justice. During these years, our typical reaction is to try to build higher walls, more control, more precautions, safer against the unpredictability of existence. It is a natural but limited strategy, because life always finds a breach. Viktor Frankl realized that this defensive approach was part of the problem. The more we try to protect ourselves from all pain, the more fragile we become in the face of inevitable pain. It is like training, only in controlled environment, and then being thrown into a royal storm. At 30, you have already undergone enough storms to realize a standard. The situations that most transformed you were precisely those that have challenged you the most. Not because you came to them, but because when they arrived, you had to discover internal resources you didn't even know you had. The shy person who had to reinvent himself professionally after a crisis and discovered his leadership ability. The eyes perfectionist who faced a disease and learned about acceptance. The controller who lost everything and found freedom in uncertainty. These are not happy accidents. It is the evidence that there is a hidden intelligence in suffering, an ability to reveal us parts of ourselves that are numb during the comfortable periods. Frankl noted that in concentration camps, some people broke quickly, while others showed impressive resistance. The difference was not in physical strength or external circumstances. It was in the ability to find meaning even in the most absurd situation. At 30, you develop this same capacity, not because it becomes stronger, but because it learns to be more flexible, like a tree that doubles in the storm instead of trying to resist rigidly in the wind. The change of question. There is a specific moment in the evolution of human consciousness in which we change the fundamental question. We stopped asking, why is this happening to me? And we start asking, what can this serve? This change seems simple, but it is revolutionary, because the first question puts us in the position of passive, victims of fate. The second puts us in the position of meaning co-creators. Viktor Frankl experienced this change in the darkest moments of his life. When he lost his manuscript, years of intellectual work, in the hands of the Nazis, he could have given himself to despair. Instead, he decided to use experience as a laboratory to test his own theories about meaning and suffering. He turned his personal tragedy into data for his research on human nature. Each humiliation became an observation, each loss an opportunity to understand how the psyche responds to the extreme. At 30, you can apply this same alchemy to your experiences. The relationship that has ended can become a masterclass about your real emotional needs. The project that failed can be a map of its limits and potentials. The financial crisis can be an awakening to its true values. This does not mean romanticize suffering or pretend it is good. It means recognizing that since it is an inevitable part of the human condition, you can choose what to do with it. Frankl developed a technique called attitudinal modulation. Instead of trying to change circumstances, when this is not possible, you change your posture before them. And this change of posture can completely alter your experience. A person who faces a chronic disease can focus on limitation or the opportunity to live more intensely. Someone who goes through a divorce can focus on failure or a chance to start over with more wisdom. A professional who loses his job can see the crisis or the possibility of realignment. The objective reality remains the same. What changes is the lens through which you interpret it. And at 30, you have enough experience to know that your interpretation has more power over your quality of life than the circumstances themselves. The awakening of inner responsibility. At 30, an uncomfortable truth becomes undeniable. You are responsible for your answers, not for the situations you face. Many of them are out of control, but by the way you choose to respond to them. This responsibility is simultaneously heavy and liberating. Heavy because it removes the possibility of victimizing indefinitely. Liberating because it returns power to your hands. Viktor Frankl lived this responsibility to the extreme limit. In concentration camps, he had no control over almost anything: where to sleep, what to eat, if he would survive the next day. But he found that he still had an area of absolute sovereignty, his inner life. I could choose how to interpret the events, how to respond to brutality, what attitude adopt in the face of suffering. And these choices, although invisible outside, determined whether he would maintain his humanity or surrender to dehumanization. This discovery has changed not only his personal survival, but all his understanding of human nature. He realized that our last and most fundamental freedom is inner, and that this freedom is exercised through apparently small but deeply transformative choices. At 30, you can exercise this same freedom in your specific circumstances. When a boss is unfair, you can choose to become bitter or develop resilience. When a disappointment, it can choose whether to close the heart or deepen your understanding of mature love. Frankl noted that these choices are not only personal, they have a social impact. When you respond to suffering with dignity, you inspire others to do the same. When it transforms your pain into wisdom, it contributes to the elevation of collective consciousness. This creates an additional responsibility. Your suffering is not just yours, it is also material to help others who will go through similar situations. The mother who lost a child and becomes support for other bereaved mothers. The recovery addict who dedicates his life to helping other addicts. The businessman who went bankrupt and teaches about financial resilience. At 30, you have maturity to support this expanded responsibility, to understand that your personal experience can be transformed into social contribution. The alchemy of meaning. There is something almost magical in the process of transforming suffering into meaning. It is as if we caught emotional lead and turn it into the gold of wisdom. But this alchemy does not happen automatically. It requires technique, patience, and intention. Frankl has identified 3 main paths to find meaning in life: through creative achievements, through experiential values, or through the attitude we adopt in the face of inevitable suffering. The first 2 paths are more obvious. Create something valuable, a work, a project, a family, or experience something significant. Love, beauty, truth. But the third way is the most radical, to find meaning in the very act of suffering consciously. This does not mean seeking suffering or martyrifying. It means that when suffering appears, and it appears to everyone, you can choose to become growing it. At 30, You've had enough opportunities to try this alchemy. Moments when a painful loss taught you about what it really values. Situations in which a humiliation showed you the importance of genuine humility. Experiences in which a failure has redirected you to a more authentic path. The secret is in the willingness to ask the right questions. What is this experience trying to teach me? How can I grow through this? How can this become wiser or more compassionate? Frankl told about a prisoner who, even hungry, shared his food with others who seemed more needy. This man had lost everything materially, but found meaning in the act of preserving his humanity through generosity. This is the alchemy available to anyone at 30. Transform seemingly destructive circumstances into opportunities to demonstrate their higher values. The person who keeps integrity even when it would be easier to lie. Who chooses forgiveness even when the hurt seems justified. Someone who keeps helping others even when no one helps you. These acts may seem small or invisible, but they are actually powerful demonstrations of inner freedom. It is proof that you can choose whoever wants to be, regardless of what life presents. The discovery of authentic resilience. Resilience is not just enduring firm or being strong. This is a superficial version that often leads to exhaustion. Authentic resilience is the ability to transform through adversity, emerging not only intact, but renewed. Viktor Frankl has developed this deep understanding through his extreme experience. He realized that the most resilient people were not necessarily the hardest or insensitive. They were those who could maintain a sense of purpose, even in the most desperate circumstances. He noted that prisoners who had a why to live, a beloved person waiting for them, an unfinished work, a mission to fulfill, were much more likely to survive. The sense of purpose literally became a matter of life or death. At 30, you can apply this discovery to your own difficulties. When you face a crisis, the question is not just, how will I overcome it, but what can this be preparing me for? Perhaps the unexpected dismissal is the push needed to follow its true vocation. Perhaps the end of the relationship is the opportunity to develop a healthier relationship with oneself. Perhaps the disease is called to reorient its priorities. This perspective does not deny the real pain of these events, but it offers a frame that allows you to extract growth from adversity. Frankl also noted that authentic resilience includes the ability to ask for help when necessary. In the fields, survivors were often those who could form connections with others, even in dehumanizing conditions. At 30, you are mature to recognize that true force includes appropriate vulnerability. Know when fighting alone and when to seek support. How to maintain independence without falling into isolation. This creates a more sustainable way to face difficulties. Instead of relying only on your individual strength, you develop an internal and external resource network that can be activated as needed. The release of control, one of the most difficult and most liberating lessons that we learn at 30, is that full control is an illusion. We can influence a lot, but controlling everything is impossible, and trying to do this just generates additional suffering. Viktor Frankl learned this lesson as radically as possible. In concentration camps, he lost control over practically everything. Where to be, what to do, when eating would survive. This total loss of external control forced him to discover a different type of power, inner power. He realized that as long as he could not control what happened to him, he could always control his answer to what happened to him. And that this inner response had a deep impact not only on its subjective experience, but on its ability to positively influence others around it. At 30, you face your own version of this challenge. Perhaps not as extreme as a concentration camp, but equally real. People you can't change, situations that are out of reach, results that depend on factors beyond your effort. Temptation is always to try to force control where it does not exist, manipulate people, obsess with results. Create increasingly detailed plans for a life that insists on being unpredictable. But at 30, you already have enough evidence that this strategy does not work. The best moments of your life probably happened when you were present and responsive, not when you were trying to control everything. Frankl called this self-transcendence, the ability to go beyond obsessive concern to himself and to engage genuinely with something greater. When you stop trying to control everything, paradoxically gains more influence on what really matters. This does not mean passivity or resignation. It means focusing on your energy where it can have a real impact, on your choices, attitudes, and answers, and let go of what is genuinely out of reach. This change of focus creates a sense of deep relief, as if you had been carrying unnecessary weight and finally could put it on the floor. The courage of vulnerability at 30, a surprising discovery emerges. Conscious vulnerability is a form of strength, not of weakness. Not the vulnerability that comes from victimization, but the one that comes from the courage to be authentic, even when it implies emotional risk. Viktor Frankl demonstrated this courage when he decided to write about his experiences in concentration camps. It would be easier and safer, simply try to forget and move on, but he has chosen the vulnerability of sharing his most intimate discoveries about suffering and meaning. This choice not only helped you process your own experience, but created a legacy that has helped millions of people find meaning in their own difficulties. At 30, you can make similar choices on a smaller scale. Share your struggle with depression to help others who face it. Talk about your business failure to demystify the fear of failure. Tell your story of overcoming addiction to inspiring others in recovery. This conscious vulnerability requires a specific form of courage, the courage to be seen in its complete humanity, including its imperfections and wounds. Frankl noted that when we hide our struggles, we missed opportunities for genuine connection, but when we share them properly, we create bridges of understanding and compassion. At 30, you have enough discernment to practice this selective vulnerability. It is not a matter of exposing itself indiscriminately, but choosing appropriate moments and people to share their deepest truths. This creates more authentic and significant relationships. Instead of superficial connections based on carefully healed images, you develop bonds based on shared humanity, and find out that people connect more with their struggles than with their successes, that their vulnerability gives permission for others to be vulnerable as well, that their healing wounds can become cure sources for others. The construction of the inner legacy at 30, the question of the legacy becomes more urgent. Not necessarily material or external legacy, but inner legacy, the type of person you are becoming through your daily choices. Viktor Frankl understood that his true legacy would not only be his books or theories, but the living demonstration that it is possible to maintain dignity and purpose even in the most extreme circumstances. Every choice it made in the fields, dividing food, offering words of encouragement, maintaining hope when it seemed lost, was a brick in the construction of this inner legacy. At 30, you are building your own inner legacy through choices that may seem small, but are deeply formative. How you respond to injustice, as people treat in positions of less power, as deals with your own flaws and those of others. These choices accumulate, over time, creating the character you will carry for the rest of your life. Most importantly, they influence other people in ways you may not even notice. Frankl believed that each human action has an impact that goes beyond the immediate visible consequences. When you choose to respond to suffering wisely, instead of bitterness, it contributes to the elevation of collective consciousness. When it turns your pain into compassion, it creates healing waves that spread through their relationships. When you find meaning in your difficulties, you inspire others to do the same. At 30, you can be more intentional about this legacy. You can consciously choose what kind of influence you want in the world, not through large heroic gestures, but through the consistency of small high choices. The person who chooses kindness even when he is having a difficult day, who keeps integrity even when no one is looking, someone who offers forgiveness even when the hurt seems justified. These choices shape not only who you become, but the kind of world you help create around you. The wisdom of impermanence. At 30, a deep understanding of impermanence begins to mature. Not only intellectually, but viscerally. You have already lost significant things and people. He has seen how permanent situations that turned completely. Viktor Frankl lived this impermanence extremely. In a matter of months, he went from a respected psychiatrist to the stripped prisoner of everything. But he also experienced the opposite. he emerged from the fields to become one of the most influential voices of modern psychology. This experience taught him that both suffering and joy are transient, and that understanding this transience can be deeply liberating. When you are in the middle of a crisis, know that this will also pass offers hope. When you are enjoying happy moments, the same conscience increases your gratitude and presence. At 30, you can apply this wisdom in a practical way. During difficulties, remembering that they are not permanent helps maintain perspective. During good times, recognizing your precious transience intensifies your appreciation. Frankl noted that accepting impermanence does not mean becoming passive or detached. It means investing energy in a wiser, focusing on what can be influenced and releasing what needs to be released. This applies to relationships, careers, health situations, financial circumstances. Everything changes eventually. The question is how you sail these changes. When you deeply accept impermanence, paradoxically becomes more able to fully commit to the present. Because you know this moment, it is difficult or pleasant, it will never come back exactly the same. This acceptance also reduces anxiety about the future and the tendency to cling to the past. You become more fluid, more adaptable, more present, and he finds that this fluidity is not weakness, it is an advanced form of strength. The bamboo force that doubles in the storm instead of trying to resist rigidly. Final reflection. If you have gotten here, it is probably because you are also finding that at 30, suffering is no longer just an unfortunate accident and becomes a demanding but transforming teacher. Viktor Frankl has shown us that our ability to find meaning in suffering can be our most important achievement as human beings. Not because we should seek pain, but because when it appears, and it appears, we can choose to grow through it. At 30, you have the emotional maturity and experience necessary to make this choice consciously. To turn their wounds into wisdom, their pain into compassion, their challenges in inner strength. If this perspective resonates with you, it may be time to look at your own difficult experiences not as evidence that life is unfair, but as invitations to discover internal resources you didn't even know you had. Share this content with someone who is also learning to find meaning in suffering. And subscribe to the channel to continue exploring how we can live with more purpose and authenticity, especially, through difficulties, because the journey of turning pain into wisdom is one of the most important we can do. And when we consciously do this journey, we not only heal, we contribute to the healing of the world.